I'm very pleased to welcome you all to this panel discussion in remembering Professor Michael Burawoy. Uh, this panel discussion has four speakers, and it is going to be ably chaired by Professor Sujata Patel. And I owe this organization to Professor Dr. Suraj Peri, who has been working very hard in contacting people. Um, as you know, this is part of a series of lectures that we have been organizing for last 1 year on behalf of RC1, that is Research Committee 1 on Theory and Practice in Sociology. And this is in also collaboration with the Department of Sociology, Nagaland University. So we thought that, with the loss of Professor Burawoy, we have been impoverished. The sociology world has been impoverished, and we must remember his legacy. So is so we are organizing this panel, and I'm very happy that so many of you have been able to join. Um, and I hand it over to Dr. Suraj Peri to introduce the speakers and also invite Professor Patel to be the chair. So first, Suraj, you first, introduce the
Yeah.
panel, and then Professor Patel can moderate. Yeah.
Thank you, Nilka ma'am. So welcome everyone. We have this panel discussion on Professor Michael Burawoy on engaging his work in context of theory, practice, politics, and kind of understand from different uh, context how his work makes sense to scholars and researchers, practitioners in the discipline here. And we thought to have a very interesting discussion, uh, given the kind of contribution Professor Burawoy had in terms of writing on different aspects of labor, on production, on class, on movements, his popular concepts on public sociology, his writings on sociological Marxism, and so on. Uh, and how much people have been contributing and engaging with this concept of public sociology, and how do we kind of talk about public sociology when both the public and sociology and social science in some sense also is experiencing challenge and attack, if we can call it that way. So we have a very interesting panel with us. We have Professor Sujata Patel with us as a chair for this panel discussion. Thank you, Professor Patel, for agreeing to chair this very interesting session. We are very happy to have you here, and you accepted the invitation on a very short notice. So for a brief introduction, I would call my colleague, Dr. Deepika, to kindly briefly introduce the chair, and then we go forward to the panelists.
Good afternoon, all the respected panelists. Am I audible, Suraj? Can you tell?
Yes, you're audible.
Good afternoon, all the respected panelists today. As we celebrate, I would say, celebration of Professor Burawoy's work and contribution to sociology, we have another eminent sociologist, that is Professor Sujata Patel, to actually to moderate the entire session of the four panelists that we have. Now, if we would like to see the background of Professor Sujata Patel. She comes from as a retired professor from Hyderabad University. Her area of interest includes social theory, urban studies, political sociology, social movements, understanding the colonial modernity. She has been holding several position also in the past, that is president of Indian Sociological Society, vice president of International Sociological Association. She has been associated as editorial boards in different journals, reputed journals like Current Sociology, Sociological Bulletin, one few among them. She was also a research fellow in different national and as well as international educational institutions. Now, well, while looking into her publication, actually, I was going through it, and there were innumerous number of publications, including books and journals. Few of them, like Doing Sociology in India, Handbook of Diverse Sociological Traditions, which includes few of them actually. So, with this eminent sociologist in India, and which is having who is having a footprint in international forum as well, I would, we are very much delighted to have her as chair of the session. Now, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Deepika. So we have 4 panelists with us. We have Professor Geoffrey Pleyers. He's a prominent Belgian sociologist who is there at University Catholique de Louvain at Belgium. And Professor Geoffrey Pleyers is also the president of International Sociological Association. He specializes in the study of social movements in different contexts, and particularly in the global this kind of context of challenges and response to the kind of crisis that has been there. He has been serving International Sociological Association in different capacities. He has been leading at different fronts.
We've lost you, Suraj.
Suraj, you are not audible.
Suraj, you're frozen.
I think there is some internet
I think
issue.
some technical problem is there.
Nikita, can I take over and start?
Yes, yeah, yes, definitely.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for participating in this, and it's a pleasure to meet old colleagues and new colleagues. Good afternoon to Geoffrey, and good evening to everyone in India. I would like to thank Nikita and Suraj for organizing this, because I think it's a very important theme to pick up for sociologists in India. Because Michael's work has a lot of relevance to what theoretical frameworks that we need to develop. And therefore, thank you for organizing this. I've been told by Suraj that everyone has 15 to maximum 20 minutes, and I hope we keep to it, because there are a lot of interventions that we may have from the audience, and I think we need to have a good discussion. So I've been asked to introduce Michael Burawoy, and I just thought I will introduce him by reflecting on when I first met him. I met him first in 2002, the summer of 2002, maybe May or June of 2002 in Johannesburg, where we had a discussion on sociology in South Africa. And as you know, he has been enormously influenced by South African sociology. He's also contributed to the framing of some of the themes in South African sociology. He has been associated with the department at WITS for a long time. And therefore, it was a very interesting moment for me to start a discussion with him on the similarities and differences between sociologies in South Africa and India. He was nominated then as a future president for American Sociological Association. And he had his conference, which all American social presidents have at the end of his term in July 2004, and this conference took place in San Francisco. And there he had, for the first time, 5 sessions on public sociology representing various regions of the world, and India was one of them. We had Veena Das, Dipankar Gupta. I was also there, and there was one on Central and Latin America, one on the Far East, one on the Eastern Europe, and one on Africa. It's this sessions that made us realize, all of us who were there in these 5 sessions, how important and significant this conference is, because it was titled Public Sociologies. And we had one of the most interesting set of presenters at that in that conference. There was Philip Krugman, there was Fernando Cardoso, who was a sociologist and a president of Brazil. There was Mary Robinson, the president of Ireland, ex-president of Ireland, and there was Arundhati Roy. All 4 of them having very important roles in refashioning critical thought in various regions of the world. And since then, I've had many discussions with Michael when we have met on and off in various parts of the world. And I want to highlight 3 issues and themes where Michael has been puzzled about sociology in India. And I'm wondering if in all these 3 themes, the panelists would like to make their contributions. Michael Burawoy came at least 2 times, but I think he came 3 times to India. The first time he came when there was the Chennai conference of the Indian Sociological Society in December 2006. He became a VP, Vice President of ISA in 2006, July, and he visited immediately afterwards, either in the end of 2006 or beginning of 2007, maybe both December, January at that time. And then he came in 2010 for the JNU conference of Indian Sociological Society. And in all these 3 meetings in India, he's asked me 3 kinds of questions about sociology in India. The first is about who are the traditional publics in India and how is sociology engaged with them. By this he meant really, he wanted to know what is the relationship of sociologists and sociology with working class movement in India and trade union movement in India. As you know, his first work when he did his MA in Zambia was to understand a post-colonial trade union movement and trying to understand the corporates and the trade union movement and the nation state in a post-colonial state. Given that India was also a post-colonial state, he was very puzzled by the lack of visibility of sociologists in understanding the working class movement in India and also the trade union movement in India. And he asked all the time, why is it that there has been little to no research from sociologists on this theme? And as you know, he went on to do work as for PhD in Chicago and then Hungary and then Russia to try and find out why is it that the trade union movement and the working class movement more generally is not relating. It has compromised or has become hegemonized by the corporate structures in different ways in different parts of the world. So what is it about India what is the relationship of working class movement and capital labor relationship, and how does it impact the way sociologists think about this, and why is there very limited work? We know of Professor Sharad Bhaumik, who has done work on this, but beyond that, there is a question what it is. And related to this was his question about Marxism in India. What is it about Marxism in India that also has not engaged with sociology? And I'm wondering, Professor Gupta, as you have thought about this for such a long time, if you'd like to address this matter. And so also, Professor Misra. The second issue is about ethnography. And over that theme, we have had long conversations, because the heritage of Indian sociology is located in using methodologically ethnography. And it is very interesting that Michael also Michael has written on the case study method and the way he has engaged with the Manchester School on ethnography. And we have had two sociologists who passed out from Manchester School, Professor Parvati Amma, as well as Professor Burawoy. So we have two colleagues who were also in the Manchester School. And though both of them are not alive today, one of the questions Michael continuously asks me is that why is it that Indian sociologists don't engage with a critical understanding of ethnography and move beyond more objectified understanding and particularistic understanding of doing village studies, etc., and move beyond and use Marxism to reframe ethnography. And as we know, he's done that in the context of the case study method. And this is a very intriguing question that I think we should address ourselves about. Why is it that as a collective, Indian sociology has not engaged with science, methodology, methods, how to think about these things, how to reflect on it, and how to rethink and intervene to present new ways of doing methodologically sociology and social anthropology. And lastly, it is about public sociology. And again, the questions that he has raised, which continue to resonate today, is what is the relationship of sociology with outside the academy? Is sociology in India interested in the themes and in the problems and the issues that organize conflicts, crisis, exploitation, oppression, exclusions, marginalization? And what have they done? What have they written about it? How have they involved themselves in these questions and worked both outside the academy and within the academy to elaborate these themes and define this sociology? Now, Dr. Bedi has given us the three, in some way, the same three themes that the panelists need to discuss. And I'm wondering if the panelists could also address these three themes, because for Michael Burawoy, he thought that Indian sociology had a unique tradition of not engaging with some of the issues and concerns that he had, and he was always intrigued because there has been a long tradition of critical thinking in and anti-colonial thought in India. So the question was, what is sociology in India, and what is it that has not become mainstreamed in terms of his own concerns that are there? And he was constantly asking how he could help to contribute to change this. So I'm so happy that RC01 has taken this initiative to have a discussion on Michael Burawoy. And we will start the discussion by having Professor Gupta as the first panelist. And I'm wondering if you can start your interventions and discuss what you think is the contribution of Professor Burawoy to which we in India need to take cognizance of. After Professor Gupta, who we will have Professor Misra, and after that, Dr. Nath. Geoffrey has asked to be the last panelist. So we'll have Geoffrey to end the, right, Geoffrey? So Professor Gupta, may I request you, and if you can keep it to 15 minutes, we would appreciate, because it's a long day for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sujata Patel. In fact, the entire sociology fraternity or fraternity of social sciences was deeply shocked when we heard the sad and untimely demise of Michael Burawoy. We were not expecting such kind of news. Am I audible?
Yes.
We were not expecting such kind of news. I have met Michael Burawoy only once. He visited Jaipur and stayed with the with IP Modi, and both were having very good friendship. Global dialogue was introduced by Michael Burawoy, and uh, our team was looking after the Hindi edition of Global Dialogue. We were having a very long discussion on various issues, and unfortunately, when Professor I.P. Modi passed away, Michael Burawoy gave me a call and uh, asked me to write an obituary regarding the contribution of I.P. Modi. But that discussion, in fact, I was there along with Rashmi Jain and I.P. Modi, and we had discussion nearly for 2.5 hours on various issues related to Indian society. And I will concentrate on some of the important issues related to that discussion. And I think theory, concept, and methods, all these three dimensions are directly or indirectly part of this kind of elaboration. In fact, I raised one important question before Michael Burawoy when he was talking about the status of Marxism in India. I raised the question that in the field of social sciences, the most difficult question or most difficult aspect is to study critically the common man. The commoner, in fact, has been unfortunately marginalized in the field of social sciences. We talk about several concepts, methods, uh, important theoretical dimensions based upon those jargons, which in fact contribute a lot as far as careerism is concerned, but the commoner is not addressed much. So I raised this question, Michael, is it possible to give importance to people's sociology in India as one of the independent branches so that the commoner could be studied effectively, analytically, and critically. Then he argued that, look, Rajiv, uh, it is very important because everywhere when I go and discuss, all these important issues come up, but hardly any serious attention is made. Then he posed a counter question. Why people sociology in India has not got momentum if commoner is there? Because at that time, below poverty line population was very much in Indian society. I made a counter query and argued with Michael Burawoy that, look, Burawoy, people sociology has become less significant because of the careerism in the field of social sciences. Now, this careerism, in fact, fortunately or unfortunately, associated with the success related to the market. So, market success and careerism, both things have become very important in post colonial India, and as a result, we are not giving importance to the commoner. Then he pointed out, I have written a very long note of that conversation with I took with Michael Burawoy. Then the next argument was there. If it is so, then why not you are giving importance to possibilities of pro-establishment social sciences vis-a-vis anti-establishment social sciences? This kind of construction is very much needed in post-colonial world. And then he pointed out that, look, the concept of public sociology, policy sociology, critical sociology, professional sociology, the concept construction related to instrumental knowledge and reflexive knowledge, all these things can be taken into consideration when we must give importance to that kind of pro-establishment perspective and the anti-establishment perspective. And my argument was that this anti-establishment perspective is in fact Marxian perspective. So Marxian perspective is still important in Indian society. Then we had a discussion regarding those arguments which Marx placed regarding 1857 war. We were arguing that was one of the important parts. Another important thing which I introduced to him was a very famous story, or rather, a story written by Premchand. And Premchand, everybody knows, was a progressive scholar. So we were talking about the famous story of Shatranj ke Khiladi. And in Shatranj ke Khiladi, Premchand in fact reveals the dialogue between Mirza Sajjad Ali and Mir Roshan Ali. Everything is happening. British army is there. War is going to take place, but both are playing chess. They are least bothered. I made this remark that, look, Michael Burawoy, this story of Premchand reveals the pro-establishment apathy toward the people, and they are interested in making argument in those things. They are playing those things which are not at all related to the people, which are not at all related to the commoner. In fact, they are least interested about the commoners attitude, commoners problems, commoners world of living. The social world of commoners is completely lost. So I think, in my opinion, when literature is giving importance, you have rightly pointed out, Arundhati Roy has written a lot regarding these commoners and regarding the status of democracy in Indian society. So these things were discussed. Another argument which I placed before Michael Burawoy was associated with Mukti Bodh. Mukti Bodh has written a very famous line, partner, what is your politics? Michael Burawoy probably never heard regarding this line of Mukti Bodh. He said, what are you talking? Yes, Mukti Bodh pointed out this fact, what is the politics? So, what is the politics partner? In fact, here, partner and politics, these two things are very important to understand the dynamics of power relationship, the process of social justice, the issues related to systemic inequalities. Muktivodh is raising all these issues by using this particular line. And this particular line, what is the politics partner? Now, this is an indication of the presence of several kinds of binaries in Indian society. In fact, without giving importance to binaries, the school of Marxism cannot be understood. This is one of the important part. Binaries in the form of good and bad, black and white, we versus they, and including the binary in the form of great tradition and little tradition. Then we had a discussion regarding the status of Lucknow School of Sociology and Bombay School of Sociology, a role of J.S. Ghuriye in this regard on the one end and role of D.P. Mukherjee on the other side. Interestingly, one issue was raised, and I think I'm sure this kind of understanding of Michael Burawoy must be discussed when you were having long discussion in the form of various deliberations. He pointed out one more thing, that what is Sanskritization and how Sanskritization is creating problematics in Indian society. In fact, I did not discuss M.N. Srinivas at all. But I pointed out one interesting thing, and I think this issue should be taken into consideration by all important schools of sociology in India. The local deities belonging to the tribal world, Adivasis, minorities, marginal sections, etc. Now, these local deities, in fact, in a very, very intentional way, are becoming integrated part of those gods and goddesses which are of universalistic character, which are associated with Hinduism. This kind of unification or this kind of homogenization, in fact, is one of the important processes of Sanskritization. So, Sanskritization is associated with upper caste or lower caste. This is another important issue. But if this kind of conversion is taking place, the local deities, the local religions of the tribal world and the Adivasis, if it is becoming an integral part of Hinduization, if it is becoming the integral part of the global, then Sanskritization is creating a trend of culture of homogenization in Indian society, and this is the most important danger which Indian society will face later on. Interestingly, the same argument appears later on in Romila Thapar's concept of syndicated Hinduism. Now, all these important parts are there. We discussed Romila Thapar, we discussed Azaz Ahmed, we discussed A.R. Desai, we discussed D.P. Mukherjee, we discussed D.N. Dhanagre, so many things, and including some of the opinions which you were having, because the debates which were going on at that time, they were becoming the part in the form of feminism, they were becoming the part in the form of critical sociology, they were becoming the part of how do we situate Indian sociology. All these important dimensions are very, very important. In fact, now this is the right time to remember Michael Burawoy in one way. Can we examine those revivalist tendencies in Indian society which are coming up so rapidly? Now, these revivalist tendencies in fact, are creating that world which, in fact, goes against the very system of democracy, the very system of secularism. In fact, humanities is in danger. So, how do we create a relationship between humanities and sciences? Michael Burawoy talked about reunification of social sciences. And in fact, in that book, which is edited by you, the ISA Handbook of Diverse Sociological Tradition, Michael Burawoy's concept of social scientization of all knowledges, it is becoming important. Now, what is happening in India, and unfortunately, particularly in Hindi belt, this kind of unification of social sciences is not taking place. Theories in analytical and critical way are not discussed. Only concept, in fact, textbook readings and passbooks, etc. They are creating the mindset of the students of Hindi belt. It is not happening in South, but it is happening in Hindi belt. This kind of binary can also be understood by using these kind of constructions. So, in my opinion, if social scientization of all systems of knowledge if it is introduced and critical and analytical perspectives, ethnographic ethnography as a method, deep ethnography as a method, and case studies by using some kind of deepness, if they are introduced for understanding the marginalized people of Indian society, probably it will be a distribute to Michael Burawoy. He pointed out that university is a workplace. It's a very important dimension which he has mentioned. Exploring the dynamics of power, labor, and the role of academics within the broader social context. In fact, if these words are importantly placed in the context of marginalized groups, particularly, because I was reading a global dialogue. Michael Burawoy had a courage to write on the issues of Palestine. In India, nobody is there to do this because of the attack on academic freedom. It is not happening. But in any case, if these things are introduced, he also introduced or reintroduced W.E.B. Du Bois as a major founder of American and global sociology. I think these things should be understood, should be read, should be examined, should be addressed in a very definite manner in Indian sociology, then I think the future of Indian sociology will go in that way where commoners are understood very, very effectively. If people sociology is not there, if public sociology is not there, then probably sociology cannot introduce that era of enlightenment for which it is meant. With this remark, I am closing my argument. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Gupta. This is the right introduction to both Professor Burawoy's work as well as what are the issues and problems that we are facing in sociology in India. So thank you for recalling your discussions and the note you have prepared for it, and I hope we can publish it at some point of time. Professor Misra, would you like to intervene now?
Oh, thank you. My voice is clear?
Yes, yes. Sir.
We can't hear you. Can you increase your volume?
It's a maximum volume. I can change if you like.
Okay, all right.
The laptop, or if
It's,
it is okay.
it's fine, sir. Yeah,
it's fine.
Okay.
It's fine.
I'll speak loudly.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Suraj, and thank you very much, Professor Patel, giving me this opportunity. Though, as far as I am concerned, I met Burawoy, Professor Burawoy, many times, but generally as an audience or as a bystander, only once he inquired about some problems about me in university in 2016 or 17, perhaps. So that was only a meeting for a few minutes. So I would speak only about, because let me begin with the one instance when I first listened to Professor Burawoy uh, in his presidential address in 2014 at Yokohama, as ISA president. And I was struck by his use of dais and stage as a speaker. He was definitely a tremendous speaker. But when I reviewed his works, I found that, please don't mind, Professor Patel, that I'm crossing the limit you have set for us. I found that he was, for some time, for a decade after 2012 or 13 or 2010, he was much interested in telling us, generally in his lectures, about crisis facing universities. So universities in crisis, and I observed that sometimes at various platforms of ISA, you'll find that universities in crisis are being discussed either by the editor of Global Dialogue, Michael Burawoy himself, or sometimes by others. So I'm focusing his contribution regarding his perspective to examine universities in crisis. And this is more relevant because nowadays we think and we find that not only universities in crisis in countries like us, but also one of the best university, perhaps the best university, is in crisis, the Harvard University itself. And this is particularly more prominent in the second term of the present president of USA. And this crisis is not only a crisis because of commodification, what Professor Burawoy used to tell us. This is crisis much more deep and perhaps significant. So let me explain his perspective, how to analyze crisis and certain limitations. He is very fond of identifying the third phase of marketization, following Carl Polanyi, very fond of. Usually in his writings and his speeches, he used that. And he explained in a very, very lengthy lecture what Carl Polanyi meant by the Great Transformation. So he thought that universities are crises, and these crises are four kinds. What he called that the crisis, budgetary crisis or financial crisis of one kind, and he gave a very in-depth example of University of California itself, that how this financial crisis is being managed by the university administration. Another crisis he pointed out, that there's a crisis of governance in different universities. But he focused on two more crises, the crisis of legitimation, which is in fact the crisis of value of education or knowledge in universities. And that is more important for us at the moment. And what he called the crisis of identity. The crisis of identity, in fact, what he meant by crisis of identity, that generally we recall the utopian past of university when we are in universities. And we also fear, we have some fear of dystopian future of universities. And I don't elaborate this point, but you can understand this point, what we mean. Either you take example of Harvard University or any other university of India or other parts of the world. Let me remind you, perhaps he visited India for 4 times, because when I was studying his biography, he said that first time he visited India 1967. And 1967, he was an undergraduate student of Cambridge University, and he was doing physics, but he got interested in sociology. So he came here with an interest, and that coincides with me also. I was a school student, but also interested in the same movement he got interested, and that the movement was Hindi versus English movement in 1967. And you know well, he also recalls that in 1960s, late 60s, it was a period of the May movement. All over the world, there were students' movement. And people like us, and people like perhaps Michael Burawoy, they have great, great expectations, you can say, with the students, that students would change the world. And no doubt, students brought about certain changes in France as well. Not only France, in Sukarno's Indonesia, I mean, in America itself, anti-war movement of Vietnam. So I'm just juxtaposing this to what he wanted to say. Very briefly, I would say. So he points out these two crises, one legitimation crisis and identity crisis. I think he has some kind of influence on Habermas. But I raise a question, and that is important for me, that the crisis is because of economic crisis or rationality crisis, the crisis of system, the system, economic system and political system, or this crisis is only limited to legitimation. I think there is also, nowadays I face that there is a motivation crisis. When I talk to my younger people and younger students and also colleagues, there is some kind of a motivation crisis also. So I think that we'll have to go beyond Michael Burawoy as well if we are remembering him at this juncture. This is one point I wanted to harp. The second point, with regard to this issue, because he was fond of analyzing crises of universities in terms of commodification or in terms of privatization. And very interestingly, he developed that idea of great transformation called Polanyi into 3 kinds of waves of marketization. And these 3 waves of marketization is, you'll find everywhere he's talking about, writing about these 3 waves of marketization. I just mentioned that the first wave, what he meant was 1795 to 1914, and there are second wave 1914 to 1973, and 1973 onwards present, the third marketization. Let me just tell pinpoint some important elements of these waves of marketization. The first wave of marketization is mainly marked by labor, land, money relationship, and mainly focused on goods. Mind it, that every wave had some counter movement according to him. The second wave mainly was a commercialization of goods and services as well. And the third wave for him, which is very important for us at the moment, that was marked by commodification of education and healthcare. And mind it, for me, this is perhaps the most important issue of our times. Not only because I'm above 70s, and I face this kind of a crisis of healthcare, but I have been an educationist as well. So I think that there is also some kind of a crisis we face in terms of education for our children. I'm reminded of his one sentence. I'll just quote one sentence, which he remarked in Pakistan when he was delivering a lecture in Lahore. He remarked in Sau when he was delivering a lecture in Delhi, Zimbabwe when he was delivering a lecture in Delhi, everywhere. And that was he was saying that in California nowadays, when he was delivering lecture, a student is indebted of $thousands on spending on his or her education. So when a student goes to the job market, he's already indebted a lot of money to pay. So this is an important point. He pointed out that the third wave of marketization is undergoing these kind of process. Now let me come to the conclusion. What I want to say, that I raise a question that this kind of commodification of marketization can explain the crisis we are facing in modern times in various education institutions, from the first world to the third world, every kind of world. How? I think we'll have to add something to it. So at this moment, I'm borrowing that idea from Christine Flies, an associate professor in Toronto. In his one of papers I read, that he talks about 3 waves of fascism. Now, this is the crux of the issue. That can we ask this question from ourselves, that every world, every kind of society is undergoing some kind of phases of fascism also. And there was a classical phase, no doubt about it, from 1922 to 1945. But there was another phase, as people say, that 1968 to 1989, where Stalinism, other kinds of Maoism, and so on and so forth. Now, after 2010, there is every kind of world, in the name of populist leaders, in the name of populist politics, in the name of nationalist political parties or nationalist politics, we find there is a tremendous rise of a politics of political parties, political formation, which compelled us to enter into new kind of authoritarianism. And the combination of commodification and authoritarianism, perhaps, I'm using perhaps, can explain different kind of crisis, and also the crisis we are facing in universities. With this, I'll stop and let us discuss.
Thank you, Professor Misra, and thank you for raising the whole question of what is the university and what is it for, and what is education in this context. And we've seen a redefinition of education as commerce and for consumerism in the last 2 or 3 decades. So it's very important to understand the problems social sciences face in the context of institutions that organize social sciences. So thank you for raising it. Now we go to Dr. Aditya Raj. Please, can we have 15 minutes of your time?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, Dr. Suraj, for reaching out, and Professor Nilika Malhotra for this opportunity. It's overwhelming that I am in the panel chaired by Professor Sujata Patel. I hope my PPT is visible. Is it, Suraj?
Yes, it is.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. I won't take more than 15 minutes. And, I want to start by going back and, telling you that since everybody is mentioning when did we come to know about Michael Burawoy, it was in 2002, I was playing around, going for my PhD to North America, that Professor Anand Kumar told me about him. And I wrote an email from nearby JNU Bedsarai. He responded immediately. It's a different story that I couldn't go to US. I went to McGill for my PhD, but he was ever in touch, from especially about global ethnography in 2002. And then gradually, I was there in that conference, Professor Sujata Patel, in 2003 in Hilton Hotel. He pulled me to give a little bit of bite for a documentary they were preparing. I considered myself lucky to do that. What I have done over a period of time, I've been so impressed by his work that I have sort of read all his work and tried to, in the recent past, do a bibliometric analysis of his work using some of the latest computational tool. Since I'm based in IIT since 2010, so probably talking to my colleagues, I've got this little understanding, and I think it's no harm to use some of these things. So I'll quickly go over his academic career background to be able to map his scholarship. He studied mathematics at Cambridge, which I think gave him a strong analytical and systematic approach. He, of course, because of his methodological rigor, he had the sound foundation in quantitative methods. All of us know about the extended case method, his work on global ethnography. That was the first book that I touched upon in CSSS library there. So from theory to practice, reading him gives us a clear understanding that he was doing his master's in Zambia, and it is where he closely studied labor and class relations. He also talks about this in his book on public sociology, from the book From Utopia to Anti-Utopia, published by Polity Press, in detail about it and in some of the conversations. So his exposure to extended case method and post-colonial broadened his sociological outlook, that is what we think, and gave him sound methodological toolkit. His training in ethnography, especially at Chicago School, and I used to be so overwhelmed when I came to know that Professor Anand Kumar and they were colleagues in Chicago School. He completed his PhD from Chicago, engaging and doing his work, as Professor Patel said, of different places in Europe, in USSR, and of course in Chicago. So his work on manufacturing consent was very, very useful. That's where we come to know about his interest in Marxism, neo-Marxism. He began his career, of course, at Berkeley. And last time I met him in Melbourne, we were talking about how public sociology, and I asked him, he was kind enough to give some time. I asked him one afternoon about, do you think your position at Berkeley and your being president of American Sociological Association and International Sociological Association give that little nudge to how we know about public sociology, and you have given a new toolkit to engage the public in various domains. So probably yes, probably the nudge was there. He did a lot of comparative studies of labor relations, and I'm glad on the call of Professor Sujata Patel, Rajiv sir has been able to discuss it. Marxism, neo-Marxism. So comparative studies, and of course, public sociology and global ethnography, seeing the macro in the micro is what shaped up further. The reason I'm using this PPT is because sometimes, I'm lucky, I'm blessed to have been in this panel, but there are young scholars and maybe they will need to do this. Here at IIT-Patna, after working on Michael Burawoy in detail using this bibliometric analysis, we worked on Bruno Latour, and his work is soon to be published. And then we are doing work on, Granovetter, and we plan to do work on Veena Das and Sujata Patel as well, on the kind of canvas and influence they have. So imagine the time, the annual Sociological Association conference. Probably it was a time when we had an historical shift in America. The ongoing war has sort of created a crisis when the public didn't want the war, and the governance was hard bent on policing the world. So probably it was a time which we can start by asking the question: should sociologists have or act on opinions regarding important issues of the day from the perspective of the public? Is taking a moral or a political position incompatible with scientific objectivity? How do we do that? How do we navigate academia, as Professor Rajesh Misra just talked about, institutional situations everywhere, whether it is Harvard or whether it is Asoka University in India, and of course the IIT systems, as all of us know. So let's think through some of this Burawoy's position. Public sentiment was ripe, sociological conscience needed to reconcile. Then when public sociology was first unleashed by Professor Burawoy, the Vietnam crisis and Iraq war, and policing the whole world from there on. So there's the promotion about sociological knowledge for whom and sociological knowledge for what. And there was a point of time I was reading his work on his take on the Gulbenkian Commission report on opening the social sciences and sort of studying sociological knowledge for whom, knowledge for what. Is sociology to maintain social order? Should it promote social change, or should it devise solutions to the sociological problems that is there? The question is not being easy. So as I said, we did a lot of work using bibliometric analysis on Michael Burawoy. When it was published, I wrote to him, and this is the emails. I tried, as the early presentations were going on, I tried to get this. I wrote to him, and he said, I'm really flattered with what you have done, sort of, reading my work. So these are the two papers that we published. There's one paper, especially with the discussion that I had with him in Melbourne, which is being, I keep on trying, and I'm trying to find a venue for this. So the two papers, one is called A Bibliometric Review Study of Michael Burawoy, published in 2004, which identifies that his most cited work. Bibliometric analysis is a process of using mathematical and statistical methods to understand the whole canvas of the work. It provides an overview of Burawoy's scholarship engagement across his examination of labor relations in Zambia, South Africa, up until different waves, talking about third wave marketization, up until how public sociology picks up. The other paper which was published was The Promise of Public Sociology, where we explored that we have been doing public sociology, but he provides a new instrumentation to engage the public in a new way. Some of the scholars like Professor Nandini Sundar and Professor Amita Babiskar, they have been doing their fair bit. Both of these scholars were invited by Professor Burawoy in the course on global sociology that he and Laila were coordinating from Berkeley. This is very, very interesting. Some of these lectures are archived at international sociological forums as well. So how we did bibliometric analysis is that we looked at different data sets. We looked at Scopus, because Elsevier provides a fair bit. We started by just going with Burawoy. We found N number, and then we looked Michael Burawoy. English, because I don't know any other language, although I tried to study a little bit of French when I was at McGill. So we narrowed down, and we used some of these specific tools. One is BiblioShiny, and the other is VozViewer. Both are about graphical representations using web interface and network visualization. We looked at all the work that he has that mentions Burawoy. We found some work by Professor Patel as well. So this is when we've just looked at Michael Burawoy's contribution. Some of his publications are there in Social Theory, American Sociological Review, citations going a lot. So this is just graphical representation using Boswell, as we said. These are the main keywords that he's talking about. You see, Gramsci, capitalism, global sociology. I think he made public sociology as global public sociology. If we just look at the way it is presented by this software that we used, Boswell, these are the journals where he published. The main authors, Burawoy, he's publishing with Krotov as well, and then by Leila Behan and other people. Some of the journals you can see, so SO, AU, and D representing different canvas, and where are they publishing, with whom. We just found this computational social science tools very, very useful to objectively present the work. As you know, he talked about 4 kinds of sociology. The reason I want to tell this, as I said, and I'm repeating, that there are young scholars as well, and I think it is very, very important to read sociologists, the kind of background they have gone through, the ontological processes, which sort of saves the epistemological, contours of the scholar, and of course the relevance. I'll draw quickly to the kind of relevance he has all the world over, and how we are doing in India. So the 4 kinds of sociology he talks about professor sociology, critical sociology, public sociology, and of course policy sociology. We can read any of his work, including the one, his lecture that he gave in San Francisco, which was published later in American Sociological Review. He also came to JNU, and we had an article by him in Sociological Bulletin. So why public sociology is important? Because of the broader connect with the public. And what is public sociology? So it is all about engaging public beyond the academia in dialogue about matters of political and moral concern, focuses in solutions to specific problems. He defines the role of sociology, which is why I thought that when he draws from the report of Gulbenkian Commission report of Wallerstein, he says that, until unless it is about people, it is about how civility and sociability is aged in the things that we do as sociologists, should not be only limited. He talks about 2 kinds of public sociology, as all of us know: traditional public sociology and organic public sociology. This is the best figure I got. What journalists do, what we do, writing for different venues, and how it is important to be in a community engagement, collaborative process in solidarity with the public, whether you call it a Marxist process or you don't want to call it a Marxist process, but it's all about public, and which is why we think his call about moving beyond all of these critical sociology or policy sociology, taking it to the public, because all knowledge, I read at one point that all knowledge is public knowledge. So what do we do when we look at the relevance of his work in India? This is from a second paper. We talk about public sociology and Indian sociological tradition. We think that we always have had people who have engaged the public, like Professor Ram Mohan Roy, Vidyasagar, M.N. Srinivas, Andre Bette, just to name some people. Burawoy's influence on public sociology, as I said, Nandini Sundar and Amita Babiskar. We have the Patel also, and because I have published 2 and the 3rd paper is in process, so we bring Burawoy to India to sort of understand the public. So public sociologist, all of us know, faces quite a bit of risk, fair bit of political opposition, and of course, lack of institutional support, because when you are working in solidarity with the public, and there can be public of all kinds, then there are chances that you get involved, and maybe you are not publishing as much, or you are doing things which the institutional norms find it difficult to support it for. So can public sociology democratize science and technology? I just put through after I heard Professor Sujata Patel's calls about what public sociology, and I think drawing from a little bit of experience, not a little bit, 15 years now in IIT-Patna, just an interjection. When I mentioned to Professor Burawoy in 2010, I was at University of British Columbia, and I wrote him an email telling him that I'm going back to India because both me and my spouse found job at IIT-Patna. He was overwhelmed, and he said, good. I know the IIT system. They are good. They are good. And I told him it is IIT-Patna. It is. He had seen IIT Mumbai. So, but then he wrote saying that, it is very, very important. Probably it is Patna. So you will have more opportunity to engage with the public. Probably you will have.
Professor Raj, Professor Raj, can you please conclude in another 1 or 2 minutes?
Yeah, of course, I'm done. Of course, I'm done. So how we can engage probably science and technology, it looks, there's a lot of disconnect with the public, especially in some of the things that, so especially when we look at development is all about, growth of science and technology, but it's also about reaching the people for whom it is meant, which sort of always is a problem. So we need to take public sociology to some of these domains as well. How, say, DeepSeek is creating problem. From above, so instead of from being from above, we need to have this dialogue from below, engaging the public. There has been a little bit of criticism of public sociology as well, especially one of his co-authored, and he himself writes about how there should be a good amount of methodological rigor. And thinking about it, I think the work of Gandhi's talisman is important, which gives us, a thread that anything that we do, we think about the poorest and the weakest man. And when we do that, we probably have the grounding, the rootedness to do any work, for the public. Thank you very much. I'll stop here now, and then probably after the questions.
Thank you, Dr. Raj. And it would be nice if you can also compare the impact of another ISA president, Emanuel Wallerstein, with Michael Burawoy, because Wallerstein has a much more larger map at that time. So it would have been very good if you at certain point compare the two. So thank you very much for this. And may I now request Professor Geoffrey Pleyers to give us his ideas about the relevance of Michael Burawoy and sociology and social movements in the present times. So, Professor Burawoy, Pleyers.
Thank you very much, Professor Sujata Patel. I would like to thank the ISS and ICO1, because it's really important to have this tribute, this reflection, not only tribute, it goes beyond, with Michael Burawoy and on his legacy. And I would like to thank my fellow panelists, the organizers, and of course Sujata for sharing it. It's an opportunity for me to listen to my colleagues from India to discuss Michael Burawoy, and as we have seen, as you have listened to them, we also see that it's a way to connect, to question, to dialogue with him, to connect our own work and perspective with Michael's insightful contribution. And this has been very insightful. This is why I ask Sujata and the organizer to be the last one to speak, because definitely this is an opportunity to listen to Indian sociologists and to see how they connected. Definitely the one who most connected with Michael was Sujata, as she was also actually Michael Burawoy when he became the Vice President for Nationalization. Well, this was the position held by Sujata before him in the International Sociological Association, and I know they work very closely together even afterwards. So Michael Burawoy, after being the president of the American Sociological Association, he became vice president for National Association of the ISA and traveled to India in this position, and then the president. So this were 8 years for him, as he told me, explained me on several occasions, of intense travel and dialogue. And so in this brief contribution conversation, I would like to point 4 specific issues on which Michael Burawoy seems to be is still very relevant today: global sociology, but also the importance of theory in his work, his way of seeing the world, and in his field work. Theory was very important. This will be my second point. Public sociology, of course, everyone has to talk about public sociology when we mention Michael Burawoy. And I would like to conclude also underlining that Michael had become a compass, a moral compass for thousands of sociologists around the world, and of course, definitely for myself, and he remains a compass. He is also, this will be my last point, the best one to provide an answer, a proposal to the motivation crisis that Professor Misra referred to. So the first point would be global sociology. It was already mentioned by Professor Raj and Professor Gupta. He started sociology in Africa. He was doing mathematics in the UK and then reading some sociology, but then he went to Zambia. He was working in a copper mines in post-independence Zambia, recently independent Zambia. So this is something also similar with Immanuel Wallerstein, who also started his work in Africa. So sometimes we think about Africa as a absent continent in our global sociology. Well, Africa is very much present there, not only thanks to these 2 great men, but also to many other African sociologists. And I have to mention that Johannesburg also remained a very important point, intellectual port for Michael throughout his career. So he completed a master's degree actually in sociology at the University of Zambia in 1972, along with his work in the copper mine. He then moved to Chicago, as everyone knows, and wrote his brilliant dissertation on Chicago's industrial workers, which would be his main book. It's really his main book. But when it's about global sociology, and I think it was Rajesh once more that he quoted Michael at its Yokohama address, presidential address, the ISA, the World Congress of Sociology presidential address in Yokohama. Michael said that global sociology must first and foremost be a local sociology, not a sociology that hovers above the ground and easily gets caught up in false universalism. This is exactly what the 4 of you before me you were talking about. It's not about the global sociology as universal as it used to be. Universal used to mean Western, and then we wanted to implement it everywhere. Well, it was over, and it was very clear for Michael that when he called for global sociology, it was a sociology able to bridge the boundaries between national scientific cultures, which is why global dialogue, it was already mentioned here by Professor Gupta, is so important. And I think that Sujata also shows very well explained very well how Michael considered sociology as a dialogue between global sociology and what he could learn from sociology in India, and he did the same kind of questions in different countries. So Michael's sociology was a sociology in dialogue between global sociology and national sociologies, but also between ethnography and theory, between public sociology and professional sociology. Which leads me to my second point, theory. Of course, everyone always underlines the importance of public sociology. This is why he became famous, worldwide famous. But I would really like to insist on the importance of theory in his perspective. Of course, he edited 2 books on ethnography, which is crucial. Extended case methods, really important. But in this extended case methods, theory is really important. It's not just ethnography, it's different. And when we insist on the importance of public sociology, which is actually, in my perspective, a very US American debate. Because public sociology is actually something that in India, in most parts of Western Europe, and definitely in Latin America, it was so obvious for most of us that sociologists were also public intellectual. It was not so much the case in the US, so this is a good contribution that he made there. But Michael insisted it was not only about public sociology, it was also critical sociology, policy sociology, and professional sociology. So I think we should not, when we mention public sociology, we should not forget the rigor and commitment to critical sociology and professional sociology that was also a feature of Michael's sociology. His work exemplifies how rigorous empirical research can inform and enrich theoretical debates, and vice versa, how theory can actually inform empirical research. By integrating local, national, and global perspectives, he has offered comprehensive analysis that resonates across disciplines and inform public and policy discussions. He pleaded to articulate and not to oppose empirical research with theoretical lenses. He was as passionate about ethnography as about theory. And this is why his ethnography are so insightful, because he combines it with solid theory. He combines ethnographic insight with analysis of economic context with a very Marxist approach that he contributed to renew and made it his own way. Well, my third point is still public sociology. It's not the only sociology developed by Michael, but still important. We just mentioned three major issues. The first one was already mentioned by Professor Misra, which is, of course, this struggle against the commodification of knowledge and marketization of universities. Universities in crisis. When he saw, especially starting in the year 2000s, as capitalism and exploitation increasingly relied on the commodification of knowledge, he started to analyze the impact of neoliberal policies in higher education and how knowledge production was cornered to extend the power of the market and the state. This became a crucial topic, but in a continuity of his previous research issues in the factories, because now exploitation and capitalism is much more reproduces itself a lot in by the commodification of knowledge. At that time, this main target was neoliberalism. Neoliberalism decreases the budgets of the university and challenges the purpose of social sciences in higher education. As someone mentioned, students have to pay a lot. It's not only about paying for your study, but of course then they are inclined to choose a topic, a career that will give them enough money to reimburse the huge debt they have at the end of their study, which is, of course, social sciences are not the career where you may earn the most money. So this is definitely, it goes beyond. It's also about why. What is the matter? Why are social sciences and sciences for? It's not only about money, it's about the purpose of higher education. And still, today, the situation is different. And here, unfortunately, India was one of the front runners in a world development, recent development. Academic freedom is attacked itself directly. It's not only about neoliberalism. It's not only about decreasing budgets. It's not only about cutting budget for gender studies in the West or in the US. It's attacking academic freedom and anti-intellectual attacks. This is happening in the US, in France, in Germany, and of course, I will not refer to your country, you know it better than I do, but here, definitely, we in the world, we have to learn much more from you and much faster. When I read my colleagues from the US, when I read my colleagues in France, in Germany, struggling to understand that all of a sudden they have to face direct attack on academic freedom or freedom of speech in the universities. It is as if they have never heard about what is happening, what has happened in India in the past decades. We need much more dialogue. We need to learn much more from the experience sociologists in India to analyze this perspective. And Michael definitely, he defended a public sociology that aimed at producing knowledge relevant to citizens, social movements, and civil society, which has been the purpose of many sociologists in India, as in, and maybe definitely more in India than in the US. Now, in terms of public sociology, I would like to mention the first big struggle, commitment Michael's was, of course, against the commodification of knowledge. A second one that goes throughout his career, since the very beginning to the very end, is the struggle against racism and for epistemic justice. He started in a copper mines in Zambia. If you go back to his early work, you see how he brings race in the analysis of capitalism in a period of time when it was not so obvious, not so common, at least, in the literature. And of course, the most well-known influence of Michael in this struggle is in sociology is his instrumental role in re-establishing Du Bois as a major founder of American and global sociology. He made it in Michael's way, being very activist, very vocal about it in audiences, but being very rigorous and thoughtful in his analysis, in his writing. He was such an expert of Du Bois' work. It was a very hard. He was a very hardworking and very theoretical sociologist. And of course, he connects it also to the struggle to defend public education open to students from different social backgrounds. He stood against injustices connected to race. And of course, I cannot, in these circumstances today, not mention that in the past few years, in the past decades, but especially in the past few years, the main struggle to which Michael dedicates so much time, energy, talks, and motivation was the struggle for peace and justice in Palestine. This is his latest article, the one that was just published a few weeks ago, was in Palestine. Most of his keynote speeches in the past year was on Palestine, and this was really a struggle he cared so much about, because he was first and foremost a human being, and he felt immediately connected to other human beings, and so he insisted on the shared humanity. And Palestine is definitely one of the places in the world today where shared humanity is denied, which is why he was so much involved for justice, peace in Palestine, and against the massacres and genocide that is going on. I cannot end on this dark note, as we feel all powerless when we see what's happening in Gaza these days. I would like to end by underlining and taking back the conversation that Rajesh Misra started, motivation crisis. Well, this is the case among our students and among many social science scholars. I just want to, if I may, give an advice to my friend Rajesh Misra. When you wonder if sociology remains useful at a time when fake news spread on social media, and when fake news, alternative truths or lies, often seems to have more impact than solidly established sociological research. When you feel that you lack motivation, when you wonder why do I work so hard to do sociology in these times, then you have to read Michael Burawoy. You have to read his books and articles. You have to listen to the recordings of his lecture. Many of them are online. You have to reread, especially his discourses. He was as passionate about books as he was about people. The people he met in the fieldwork, the people he met in his classes, the people he met in academia, in the congresses, in life. For him, the four spheres, fieldwork, the class, research, and life, were never split. He was a generous man as a teacher and as a scholar and as a human being. Especially why it was so important in terms of motivation is because he reminds us why sociology matters in our times and why it is worth devoting so much time and energy to doing and teaching sociology. Let me quote him. Let me quote a short part of the discourse he gave in Miami, in a protest in March 2024. He said, "Sociology helps students understand how society is collective, the role of race, of class, of gender. Sociology is a scientific study of inequality and the oppression this entails. We study exclusions not to advance them, but to recognize and publicize them and to better understand how they can be contested and reversed. This is why we do sociology. And Michael told us this is also why sociology is so much attacked today. So, in such a period, in India, in the US, and everywhere in the world, we miss very much Michael guidance, theoretical guidance, but also motivational guidance. We miss his way of organizing, of giving us hope in this time. We also miss his rigor in sociological analysis and theory. And I would say that we especially miss his unique energy, commitment, enthusiasm, his smile, his kindness, and his generosity.
Thank you very much, Geoffrey. It was excellent that you reminded us about the paper that had just come out in Sociological Review on Palestine and the concerns he has had on peace in Palestine. But as he mentions in that paper, there are many other places where there is conflict and war going on across the world. And Palestine has become the motive for understanding other places also. And one of the most interesting part of this paper, and I wish everyone would read it, is that for the first time, he tackles what is settler colonialism. And he talks about the two forms of settler colonialism, of appropriation of land as well as different from appropriation of labor. And he suggests that South Africa had the second way of experiencing settler colonialism. And the first way is what has been the way Palestinians have experienced it. So thank you for mentioning this paper, which just got published 2 or 3 weeks back in Sociological Review. It's a special issue that came out in Sociological Review, which is a journal of American Sociological Association. So we have got very interesting interventions from the panelists. And I'm wondering if there are any questions that the audience would like to ask the panelists before we end with the panelists giving their own ideas. So could we have your hands raised so we can ask you to give your questions or comments? Please keep it brief. Any questions or comments from the audience? Suraj, can you see anyone? I don't have access to all the
so far no one has raised.
Okay.
I'll just
Nikita, please. Nilika.
Yeah, I'll just briefly come in here. I had not engaged much with Burawoy's work, but I met him for the first time in JNU, and probably this was 2008 or 9. I'm not sure about, yeah. So, and he gave a talk in our center, and I remember the packed room and the kind of energy that he brought to his lecture. And this was on comparing Gramsci with Bourdieu. And I clearly remember how he presented the two perspectives, and he looked at the divergences and the similarities. So what I was struck with was the kind of enthusiasm and energy he brought in the talking about these two scholars. And I also remember, I think one of the panelists also mentioned about his concern for the students and the kind of money that they spent. And he was also talking about the same thing in JNU also. And but what one point he made, which was very interesting to me, is to that he said that I not only teach, but as teachers, we also have to entertain students. The students have to remain engaged with the lecture, so you have to be energetic. And it was a great performance that he was making. And so he was definitely a wonderful speaker as well, and very energetic on that. The second time I met him was in Berkeley. When I sent him, I was on Fulbright there, and I just sent him a mail, and within no time, he called me to his chamber, and we had a discussion about, variety of topics. And he was amazingly warm and, uh, extremely passionate about what he was doing. His passion for public sociology is definitely something that all of us look up to. And the point that you made, the chair made in the beginning, that why Indian sociologists don't engage as much with the public, it remains very relevant. That how do we look at the history of sociological engagement with the public issues is something that is something that we take back. And his concern with ethnography is definitely coming from his background in anthropology, social anthropology, and the kind of his exploration of the micro in the macro is coming from his emphasis on the richness of ethnography and ethnographic data, which uh, links the two, micro and macro. So I'm really glad that all of you have actually provided so much of food for thought. And I'm really grateful to all the panelists here, and of course the chair, uh, for bringing the memories of and the importance of significance of Buraway's contribution to not only sociology, global sociology, but also Indian sociology. I can see there is one, I think, question here. Um, so Sandeep Gupta.
Yeah, Dr.
Uh,
Sandeep, please
yeah.
just ask this question.
Yeah, I don't know. My network, I'm facing some problem. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was just trying to link what Professor Misra was trying to cover in his this thing. I don't know. Just a minute. I think I have again cut off.
No, we can hear you.
Yeah. Maybe I read his question then.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. So his question is, how has the introduction of performance-based metrics, particularly that we have under this NIRF and NAC, commodified the role of teachers and researchers in Indian universities, particularly in line with Professor Burawoy's view on internal marketization of academic labor?
Professor Misra, would you like to answer?
Yes. Sure. But before that, I would like to have my comments on what the chair, you said in the beginning, I forgot, and also mentioned by Nilika and others. I mean, perhaps there is hardly any doubt about it that Professor Burawoy's opinion that Indian sociology has not dealt with publics specifically. But I'm reminded of your presidential address once, and also your writers, your also, and also a little bit history of sociology in India. And I think that Professor D.P. Mukherjee in Lucknow University, he in fact instrumental in establishing AISF, and he addresses 2 conferences of AISF, and one lecture is very famous and is compiled in his book on culture, youth culture. So this is one. And that's another point. And there's another point that he was also some kind, I heard once Burawoy was telling that he's not, he deals within sociology of Marxism, but perhaps not Marxist sociologist. But very famously, DP used to say that he is not Marxist, he's a Marxian. I mean, that is very famous. And philosophically, also substantively, but philosophically, he used Marxian perspective in his way of looking at Indian society. This is one. And looking at social change and other parts. I'm also reminded of A.R. Desai, Professor A.R. Desai, because I interacted with him many times, and I found that he was very, he's more ideological, more political. He practiced with some kind of his ideas, and he also dealt with some publics. So we'll go in deep in history of sociology. Perhaps you'll find. And there are famous discussions and debates of DP, and just opposite to DP is a student A.K. Saran. And these are very enlightening kind of debates. Of course, Burawoy also has some kind of conversation with Eric Olin Wright and Bourdieu, and now mentioned by somebody else, other fellows. So, but in India, situation was different. They were more polemical rather than they are more cooperative, kind of Eric Olin Wright discussing utopia or reality utopia with Professor Burawoy. So this is one. So I wanted to reflect on this. This is another point which the Sandeep has raised, very important point. And I have not gone in very detail of Burawoy's analysis. He discusses various functions of universities nowadays. And he talks about at length the contribution of, he gives example of England particularly, UK, United Kingdom, where there is a ranking system of universities. World over, there is a Shanghai, there's all kinds of ranking system. He gives examples. And he gives example how universities nowadays addresses budgetary issues through this kind of ranking, as well as they also use financials, good people in finance and administrator, and they appoint them as financial administrator in universities to deal with this situation. Very famously, he talks about football, American football, and he says that how University of California invest in football, appointing coaches in $1 million annual contracts, so that through football they can earn some kind of finance and other thing too. University also market itself, and ranking is one of them. So the point is, we'll have to go into the depth. Now, university commodification of university is a very large scale and very very in detail also, that how university arranges finances. He mentions that University of California, though California state is a democratic state, and democratic state to the tooth, I mean, highly democratic state, much more majority. But even then, the University of California faces grants and I mean, I should mention that example. He gives example of the chancellor of the university of 10 campuses of University of California, how the chancellor, she is a chancellor, but she is not from academics. She is, I mean, how they're kind of seen it, how business people, other people are appointed, and how these resources are met. So this would become a different story. But the point is that even ranking system is being used in our university system nowadays. How ranking system is used to give grants by state and other agencies, we know very well. So this needs some kind of in-depth analysis. I just reminded you people that how this aspect has been very thoughtfully analyzed by Michael Burawoy, and we should, when we are discussing universities in crisis, then perhaps this would help us. That's what my.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Is there anyone else who would like to ask a question?
Ma'am, I would like to ask a question.
Yes, please do.
Yeah, thank you. My question is to Professor Pleyers. Since you mentioned in your discussion about global is particularly theorized in Professor Burawoy's work, it's not universalizing. It engages with different national, regional contexts. How do we see Burawoy's work? Particularly, I was fascinated by this work, which one is Conversation with Bourdieu, where he writes with Carl von Volt on how we create a dialogue or interaction between, when he says Fanon meeting Bourdieu, when he says you have a discussion, and Professor Burawoy is explaining how do they converge, what kind of similarities and dissimilarities are there. In what way Professor Burawoy's engagement with these questions, which are very much relevant, and when he talks about Fanon, he talks about decolonization. He talks about this concern of the kind of response, the resistance. How do we engage with both Professor Burawoy's work, which allows us to look at this Indian society in a kind of different way, where we are not simply copy pasting the concepts, what Professor Uman says, alien concepts in South Asian realities. We are engaging with, there's a critical approach to kind of also develop some sort of anti-colonial, anti-European, this kind of approach which homogenizes the kind of engagement in sociology. What are the resources that we can engage with in Professor Burawoy's work?
Geoffrey?
Yes, thank you. Well, this is a complex question for me because actually I am probably the least competent one to reply to it. I will just say that, of course, Michael Burawoy, what he did is to bring Fanon and other people, and actually he was very conscious of coloniality and in sociology. Now, this is, if you ask me how Indian sociology should engage with this, I'm just surprised by the question, because for me, I'm not an expert at all. So, but I would say that Indian sociology has engaged with this ever since it has become Indian sociology. Since the founders, notably in Lucknow, Indian sociology has been developed by pointing out that this Western sociology was just not always useful. They were not a good concepts to understand what is happening in India. And of course, T.K. Omen, who was also ISA president, a very important one, insisted on this point. But you can see all the work, not all because she's published so much, but a big part of the work by Sujata Patel is of course also on this perspective. And so this is actually, it's not how should we engage with Michael Burawoy on that. It's actually, this is, Indian sociology has been founded on this very idea that it should be different from Western sociology. It should challenge, question Western sociology. But I would also say, and here I'm not an expert, so please feel free to have a different opinion. I would also say that a founding a cornerstone of Indian sociology since its founding is it is not, as you said, anti-European. It was very clearly taking from Western sociology some interesting point and then revisiting it, challenging it, but it was not anti-European. It was anti-Eurocentric, for sure, anti-Western-centric, definitely. And these are the roots of Indian sociology that starts really with this question in the 1920s and 30s. And I think that you have a very strong tradition until today, which is why it is so important today. And here again, and Sujata has done a very important work in the ISA and beyond, but we have to do more. We need to make sure that Indian sociology is much more visible in global sociology and not only as a way of understanding India. Of course, it is also a way to providing categories, concepts, fieldwork, empirical elements to understand the world today. I briefly mentioned it that if the very limited knowledge I have of what is happening in India and books I could read from my Indian colleagues, which is really minimal in comparison to your knowledge of Indian sociology. Well, this minimum helps me to understand what is going on in the US today. And so this is the step we have to do today, is to, at the same time, to respect the diversity and difference of each, not only national sociology, also maybe more local in many cases. And not to essentialize it, meaning we have to have an intercultural sociology, opening ourselves to perspective from different sides and points. Of course, today, global sociology is the first and foremost the opposite of false Eurocentric universalism. But then we have to see what we can learn from different places. And definitely, in this perspective, I'm optimistic. This is what I try to share when I met many of you in the Indian Congress of Sociology. I'm optimistic when I see the way we've done what we have done in the past maybe 25, 30 years, that global sociology includes much better, much more elements from different countries, notably from India. But I also see the way we still have to do. And this is very long because I don't know for you, but I haven't read many analyses in international journals or even newspapers that brings together what you have learned from what has happened in India in the past decades, a bit more, and how it is useful to understand what is happening today in the US. No, on the opposite, we will see many American scholars who discover it as if it was the first time it happens, as if there's no authoritarian nationalist leader elsewhere, because it's the US, everything is new. No, come on, I think we do need, I mean, my dream would be to have a ASA conference, annual conference, full of Indian sociologists to explain them what is happening in the US. So, and for that, we still have a long way to go.
Thank you, Geoffrey. It's an interesting idea. Let's hope it happens. Anyone else who would like to ask a question? If not, may I ask Professor Gupta to make final remarks?
Thank you, Professor Sujata. I have heard all deliberations, and I have found that there is a need to incorporate some of the basic contributions of Michael Burawoy in our syllabi. So this is the first beginning which we can make for a continued remembrance of Michael Burawoy in the field of social sciences. Now, my second point, because some of the important questions were raised, I think reunification of social sciences is needed. This is the basic flaw which we are experiencing in the field of sociology. We are not giving importance to historians economists, philosophers. In fact, Professor Rajesh Misra was talking about so many things, but we have forgotten D.P. Chattopadhyay. What is living and what is dead in Indian philosophy. Yeah. We have forgotten D.D. Koshambi. We have forgotten so many historians, and even the classical literature related to uh, the quote-unquote Sanatan and its counter thesis by the indigenous protest religions. Now, if we give importance to all these dimensions, then probably Indian sociology can acquire public character. Public Indian sociology can be constructed by introducing this multiplicity, multiple perspectives, and then only we can have deep case study. Then only we can have ethnographic profile. So simple sociological understanding will not serve the purpose. And in fact, what I experienced that uh, some of the important dimensions are needed for analyzing the social world of the marginalized people and its relation with capitalism, its relation with different forms of modernity, and its relation with the democracy and democratic sliding. All these things are taking place. We them study is an eye opener for us. In academic freedom index, India is ranking 157 out of 159. And authoritarianization is coming up in all societies. I think marketization and authoritization, along with this kind of understanding, which is coming up in the form of brutal state sponsored violence. I think these things should be openly discussed in the field of social sciences. Then only a rich and honest tribute will be given to Michael Burawoy. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Gupta. Would you like to say a few words, Professor Misra?
Sir, you're mute.
You're mute. You're mute. You're
We
mute.
can't hear you. Yeah.
I'll just in one sentence. I'm borrowing. I mean, is Professor Burawoy's sentence. We live in the era where the university loses its autonomy. This is his sentence. I'm adding only its meaning and value. That's the only comment I would.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Raj, do you want to add anything?
Just a couple of seconds. I think Michael Burawoy was a very nice person, very warm. He touched many of us in different ways. In this panel, I'm the youngest, and I think when I went to San Francisco for the American Sociological Association conference, he invited me to the campus. He introduced me to Rakare and Ananya Roy and other people. I thought it was beyond many, that other people might do, giving time, replying back within seconds. So he was a very nice person, and I think as teachers, as researchers, as sociologists, we need to imbibe this in our scholarship, in our practice, in our dealing with students, in putting up what can be thought through as talking back to power through our writings, through our dialogue, through our motivation to the students. Probably as Professor Gupta said, maybe we can have him and his work in our curriculum and think through how our own legacy, such as that of Premchand and other people, Saran Kumar Limbale, various things can be thought through tribal studies, engaging with the public. As I conclude, I want to thank my student, especially who culled a lot of data around Michael Burawoy's work, Anushka Sinha. And we try and do this with my team here. We try and study one scholar. Probably in maybe next year, we'll be able to give you work on another person, Michael Granovetter. And Professor Sujata Patel, I will definitely look at and do the comparison of Michael Burawoy and Wellesley. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Geoffrey, would you like to give a few words before I take over?
Very, very briefly to thank you all, because it's really so good to remember Michael Burawoy's contribution here in India. It's important, but it's also Michael. It's also an excuse to open this broad dialogue between, and also the dialogue between theory and empirical research, and for which Indian sociology have contributed so strongly. So let me also say that founder of Global Dialogue, the magazine of the ISA, and this magazine is published every 4 months and is available in Hindi, Bengali, English, and 13 other languages. Obviously, we don't have that many readers and contributions in India, but I hope this will change now, as it is a way to pursue Michael Burawoy's work.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for this panel.
Thank you for being part of this, Geoffrey. We are, the RC01 is very, very fortunate to get you to discuss your point of view on Michael. I just would like to end up by saying that a lot of people have talked about, scholars have talked about his ideas, but I'd like to end by saying that his ideas were able to communicate what he wanted to say because of his practices of not only being a mentor to the students, but also being presenting himself as an equal with his student. And that is a quality I think we have to incorporate as a practice. He was not only a charismatic performer, but he was passionate and committed about what his ideas were. But the way he interacted with every individual and the way he institutionalized a democratic conversation is something that we have to learn from. And I think that has actually given an imprint of his ideas across the world, more than just writing about these ideas. So I think we have to remember him. And because a large number of us are teachers and researchers, that is a very important point that we have to take into account. I know it's become very late. It's 2 hours since we started. I wonder if we can end up now, Suraj and Nilika, because it's 7 o'clock India time and others are in different time zones and have other things.
Yeah.
But this has been such an exciting discussion. I was there in the memoriam that organized by ISA and which Geoffrey organized, and everyone was so emotional. But today we've had a real discussion about his ideas and his contributions and the values he tried to expand across the world. So thank you everyone for attending this, and thank you all panelists for being there. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you
Professor
so
Patel.
much, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah.
I thank all the panelists. Professor Rajesh Misra, thank you, sir, for being with us. In spite of your medical condition, you were full dedicated that we will be doing it and we will be part of this discussion. I thank Professor Rajiv Gupta, sir, for being the support in organizing this particular discussion. Thank you, Aditya Raj, sir, for always being available and readily sharing your articles. And I also thank Professor Geoffrey Pleyers for joining for this panel discussion. Hopefully, we'll meet you in Morocco for ISA 5th Forum. Thank you, Professor Patel, for being with us. And it's lovely to listen to all this discussion. It's a lot of new ideas, insightful kind of lots of discussions. So with this, we will formally close this panel discussion.
Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, thank you.
Professor Nilika. You have given
Thank
us
you.
opportunity to understand Michael Burawoy in a very,
No, I think we have learned a lot. We have learned a lot from this session. And I wanted to also announce that this session, the recording of this session will be available on ISS website. So we are recording all our lectures for the larger dissemination of ideas. So